because one thing I'll share is that oftentimes people think that professional performers just never get nervous. Like, oh, well, they're able to do this because they just don't get nervous. But actually, all throughout my career, I would be nervous leading into a competition when I was a younger gymnast. And then even all throughout my decade-long career with Boston Ballet, I would get that, the sweaty palms, the heart palpitations, all of those physiological stress responses that are basically our body saying, hey, like, this is kind of scary. It's scary to go out in front of potentially tens of thousands of pairs of eyes to do something that's hard, and to know that you really only have one chance to execute on it.
Hey everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast, brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. I'm laughing out loud here because I was just currently in a training and I feel a little bit tired, but when I have to present and when I have a guest in a podcast, my energy immediately goes back. My name is Boris, I'm the founder of the company, and today with me, we have someone who was a nationally ranked athlete. I love this, by the way. Rachel, I love the word athlete and how it's being pronounced, especially in people in the US. I really love how it sounds for some reason. Anyway, let's move on with your introduction and we'll go, then I'll jump to you. She was also a professional ballet dancer. However, today, she is the CEO of a company that's called Virtual Sapiens. And that one is a company where they use AI, or artificial intelligence, to deliver communication insights on video calls. Rachel is for sure going to tell us a little bit more about that one. And her work, I would say, something else that's interesting in the field of nonverbal communication and other areas, is also featured in media sites like Harvard Business Review, all right, the Boston Globe, and by the way, Psychology Today. Rachel Cossar, right? That's how we pronounce it. Rachel Cossar, welcome to the podcast. Happy to have you on board.
Thank you, Boris. Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Tell us more about how did you ended up from an athlete to a presentation type of person? What happened?
Yeah,
there?
Absolutely. It's hysterical because when you look at just the point A and the point, I don't know what you would call this, G, it seems like a pretty drastic shift of athlete to professional ballet dancer and then CEO of an AI tech startup. But the evolution has been very, very logical in the sense that as a rhythmic gymnast, as a professional ballet dancer, those are very expressive performance endeavors, right? And there's a lot that goes into the mindset of a performer and also the way that you communicate non-verbally with an audience that actually translates into some of the core skills that we expect in our corporate leaders, managers, and just in general, right? Communicating in the workforce. When I retired from the ballet, I danced with Boston Ballet for 10 years. I retired in 2016 because of an injury, which was very unfortunate, of course. But when I moved into a relationship role at Harvard in fundraising, that's when I first noticed, like, oh, there are all of these skills that I am basically an expert in that are very relevant to the way you show up to work, both for yourself, for your colleagues, and most importantly, with your clients. And that was kind of the little seed that ended up sprouting into what we're doing now with AI, trying to open up access to that kind of quality communication training.
So what are you doing with AI? That was more about the Virtual Sapiens part and the platform that you are building there, because that seems like especially if you go to the website, and I recommend everyone and just everyone make sure that you go to the website to see some of the screenshots and the previews of the platform. What are you doing there? Like, tell us a little bit more about it.
Absolutely. So when the pandemic first struck and we all moved online, many of us realized that there's an updated set of skills that's required to really communicate most impactfully and be engaging as a speaker on video, right? Communicating to a lens is very different from how we feel when we're communicating to a 3D human in the same room. And so I was doing lots of facilitations and coaching around how you can feel more present, more human on video. And what I noticed was that a lot of what I was coaching people on was pretty repetitive in terms of certain baseline communication best practices, like how to think about lighting, how to think about framing, why it's important from a nonverbal perspective to have your lens at eye level so you're not looking down on your audience or your audience isn't looking down on you, right? And then like, how do you think about using hand gestures? How can you hack eye gaze? And I thought, if everyone's on video now and people are having relevant business interactions on video, wouldn't it be interesting if we could provide everyone with their own communication coach? Someone on the sidelines, coming from a coaching culture myself, someone on the sidelines to be like, oh, Boris, like in this moment, you started to slouch or you started to touch your face and you covered your mouth with your hand. Like, stop doing that. Or, you've been doing a great job, keep doing what you're doing, so that we can provide people with more consistent access to personalized feedback.
Yeah. So does that work like you have a meeting, you record it, and then you push it to the software, it analyzes you and gives you recommendations, or is it in some other way? How does it?
So it's live in call.
Okay.
So using it now, it will give me a nudge if all of a sudden I start just focusing on your image on my screen and talking to your image, right? Which is what many of us do because we like to talk to humans, when really I should be presenting to my whole audience. That will be, the focus point of the lens. So it gives you live in call nudges so that you can course correct. What we found is, if you get this feedback after the fact, you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I guess I can see how I do that. But it's different to have someone be like, no, you're doing it right now. And then you build awareness and then you can improve faster.
And obviously the other person is not seeing the recommendations.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
It's just right now it's just your own private coach.
Yeah. All right. That is nice. Okay, we'll touch on Virtual Sapiens later on again. However, you were coming from the world of sports and professional sports, which is related and involves a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, especially at competitions. And when we were exchanging those emails, we decided that that topic would be of interest to our audience. What are the techniques to manage and to handle those pressure, those situations that are full of pressure, full of stress, in the context, of course, of presentations, public speaking, etc. Our audience are business people. I would say that everyone would somehow complain about the fact that they feel nervous, stressed, under pressure, especially the more important the presentation is, the more pressure there is. My first kind of question, now that we mentioned the word sports, is obviously professional athletes experience the same. Are there any things that we can take from professional athletes and just apply them in the business world and help us out lower that stress levels, if you wish, before an important presentation, talk, or whatever it may, or virtual call in this world and nowadays?
Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite kind of themes is exploring some of these parallels, right? Like, what is it that performers have to master in order to get on stage every night in front of thousands of people live and perform and not have it, completely destroy you from a nerve perspective? Because one thing I'll share is that oftentimes people think that professional performers just never get nervous. Like, oh, well, they're able to do this because they just don't get nervous. But actually, all throughout my career, I would be nervous leading into a competition when I was a younger gymnast. And then even all throughout my decade-long career with Boston Ballet, I would get that, the sweaty palms, the heart palpitations, all of those physiological stress responses that are basically our body saying, hey, like, this is kind of scary. It's scary to go out in front of potentially tens of thousands of pairs of eyes to do something that's hard, and to know that you really only have one chance to execute on it, right? So in terms of techniques that many athletes and performers use, there are I would say, if there are two takeaways that could help your audience.
Okay.
The first one, and this won't come as a surprise, but practice, right? Really taking the time and giving yourself the space to practice, but not just running through the script, right? It's not about reading the script, going through the motions, and then when it comes, quote unquote, showtime, expecting all of the other pieces to fall into place. When we practice as artists or as performers, we go through the whole kit and caboodle, right? Initially, yes, we have to learn the script. You have to know the choreography like the back of your hand, because in the moment you want to be responding to the energy of the audience, responding to whatever live performance mishaps or changes to the plan will inevitably come up. But so the script. Once you know the script, you have to start bringing in those other aspects of what your experience will be like. What will you be wearing? What is the space that you will be in? If this is a virtual meeting, run through the presentation on your laptop with the lighting exactly as how you'll have it, with the setup, with your keyboard where it's going to be, with your mouse, your notes, everything. And doing that, it depends on the individual, but enough times that you can get it to the point where you can very naturally flow through the presentation without it feeling or sounding robotic. Right? I think.
Yeah. So that by the way is, I always love to say that when we advise everyone exactly what you said, I always like to say that this is probably one of the advices that most business people don't want to hear, because everyone complains about the fact that they don't have the time. And yet every single time when you are asked that question, hey, how can I kind of reduce this? You say, I always like to say to them, hey, I'm sorry that I will have to say this. I know you won't like it, but it is what it is. And preparation will play a tremendous role in the overall way of how you feel and how you end up delivering that presentation. However, I don't get to I really appreciate you saying that I hear you say that it's great if we can get to as close to the same situation as we are going to be in, right? So that we limit the number of things that are unknowns, if you wish, that could surprise us in an unexpected way. That one is also a really, really nice one. Hopefully people will kind of listen to this one, because I also super support a lot that stuff. What about the other? By the way, that is so true if you think about athletes. I mean, we see the polished version of them when they're on I don't know, at an arena or any other place. We don't see them going at a boxing match for first time ever. It won't make sense if they do that.
And even so, it's really interesting, because as a gymnast, the structure of the day of the competition itself, and so this can be helpful for people who might be doing in-person presentations, right? People are coming back for conferences and even in-person meetings. But if you're able to go to the space that you'll be speaking at, right? Maybe you don't have access to the stage. Maybe you haven't had a tech check. Maybe that's not part of that experience. If it is, great. But if it isn't, even just being able to visualize the space where you'll be standing, your perspective of you in front of your audience, just it's prepping your mind so that when you do get into that space, you're not your body isn't taking in all of the overwhelming sensory details all at once. There's a level of expectation there, right? And as a gymnast, we would,
Mm.
before the competition, we would get a specific amount of time to try out the carpet that we would be on. So and you can get a feel for where the judges are, where the audience is sitting, what the lighting is like, where you're going to throw something so that you're not throwing it on top of the light, but just beside it, right? Tiny things like that. Um,
Yeah, that could ruin it all, though.
mm-hmm.
I mean, if there is one mistake like that, you throw something, I don't know, and you hit something else with a ball or with something else, that could ruin the whole
Right,
performance. If you think about it,
right,
sounds like a small thing, but at the grand scheme of things, it could ruin everything, more or
right.
less.
And
Absolutely.
actually, Boris, there's a really interesting kind of additional piece here that I think is really important for people, in that if you're able to have a greater sense of control leading into that moment of presentation, it can help boost your confidence and reduce some of that anxiety, right? Part of what makes live
Yeah.
performance so scary is that no one knows how it's going to go, right?
Yep.
But and that creates a sense of lack of control, right? And so having a ritual of practice can help you gain some of that control and start to build a layer of trust in knowing that you're prepared, right?
Yeah. What about the other things you mentioned? That there are two major takeaways. This was the first one, incredible one. Hopefully, more people will take those ideas and apply them, at least for the important
Yeah.
moments. At least. What about the other
Yes. So
one?
the other one is actually both, it can be used both in those moments right before you walk out on stage, right before you walk into the conference room or click join that virtual meeting. And then it can also be used during the event itself, where maybe you're getting a sense of overwhelm, or you're starting to feel some anxiety, or you made a little mistake and you need to get back on track. And it's a concept I call physical anchoring. And this is something, again, that lots of athletes and performers will do as a practice to bring themselves into the present moment, reconnect with their bodies, right, their breathing and their intention, right, remembering why it is that they're standing in front of all these people, why it is that they're connecting virtually with this audience. And the practice itself is not complicated, right? It doesn't have to take very long, but it involves taking a moment to almost separate everything that might be going on around you, to take a moment with yourself, to anchor in your body, connect with the floor, right? The floor is a big theme for performers because it is such a reassuring presence, right? The floor is always going to be there for you. So if you can connect with the floor, it automatically brings you back to the present moment.
All right. Yeah. What about, by the way, when I was listening to this one, and when you said, when you mentioned the rehearsals and the repetition, I hear another question, at least from our customers, is that when you advise someone, okay, we need to go through it, we need to rehearse it in the same way as you are planning to deliver it, no matter whether or not it's a big stage or a boardroom or whatever. Go there early with the clothes that you're planning so that you are as close to, right, with all of that. For sure, there has to be a moment when someone asks you, okay, so how many times should I do that? What is the everyone is searching somehow for this magic number. Should we call it a magic number of how many rehearsals should I do? What is your take on the magic number of rehearsals?
I think it depends on it depends on the length and complexity of what it is that you're delivering, and then it depends on how many times you've done it yourself, right? So if I think about and this will maybe make me sound crazy, but if I think about the facilitations I do today, I do virtual presence facilitations with leaders all over the world. The first time I ran one of these facilitations, and this is a 2.5 hour facilitation virtually, I went through by myself, talking to myself, the whole program, right? And of course, without an audience, it took me an hour. It didn't take me 2.5 hours. But I went through the whole thing with like pausing, pretending to do the breakout rooms, going through the motions as though it were live. And I did that fully once after I had familiarized myself with the material, right? So that I wasn't reading my slides. And then right before the actual facilitation, I would do like a very quick, just mental run through of it, right? So for me, maybe total, it was 3 hours of practice for a 2.5 hour virtual presence facilitation. It honestly doesn't, to me, it just really doesn't sound like that much, but the level of rigor of those hours was high.
But you are also saying something that's extremely important. This doesn't include the time that you take to learn what you need to cover. And that sometimes for a 3 or for a 2 hour or 2.5 hours of facilitation could be quite some material.
Yes.
So let's not forget that. And I don't want everyone who is listening to this one to say, okay, well, 2.5 hours, 3 hours of repetition. That means that for my 30-minute presentation, I should be, careful there.
Yes.
Careful there. This doesn't include. You mentioned it in the same way as with at least the day, and especially with your experience before, that the moves that you need to do are not even rehearsed. Like they become somehow just part of you. You don't have to even think about them anymore. Is that what we're searching? Is that what you're going to advise business people to also chase, not to kind of learn by heart maybe, but to somehow create and make a presentation and rehearse a presentation to the level where the content just becomes, just part of them?
Yes. So what I love about what you just said, I think is really important in that there's a difference between rote memorization, right, which can sometimes sound robotic and which can be dangerous in the sense that if somehow your attention gets broken or something unexpected happens and then you lose yourself and you don't really know where to pick up, right? That's just kind of linear memorization. But knowing the material innately, right, getting to the point where you're so comfortable with the material that someone could jump in the middle of what you're saying and say, I don't actually understand that part at all. Can you give me some examples? And then you have to, pause and improvise, think on your feet and respond, and then pick up where you left off, right? That kind of comfort with your material, I think, is essential because going back to what I said earlier, it then allows you to be very authentic and natural in how you show up versus being like, the only way I'm going to get through this is if I have space to get through this monologue and everything goes perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you, by the way, do you get to, like, with your customers and with everything that's around you, do you end up having those cases where there are people that, let's say, because last year, for example, at our event, we had a person from Silver Fox Productions, which is one of the biggest presentation agencies out there. And Scott was talking about one of the top executives in an IT organization, one of the top IT companies out there. And he, as part of his presentation, he mentioned that those people are so busy, and they're so busy with things that cannot be delayed. This is not a meeting that you can cancel. It's a meeting with, one of their meetings is with the government to discuss a multi-billion-dollar contract. Then they have to jump into a winner interview with the media in Germany. Then it's just a nightmare. Their schedule is just a nightmare. And then he said that these people always go on stage and always deliver. And I asked him, how is that even possible? Right? Like, I wanted the audience to hear how that's even like, how do you end up in this
Right.
level of performance, if you wish. And he said something that became more or less the quote of the
Uh-huh.
conference. He said some, I think he said it this way: he was always prepared because he was constantly preparing.
Yes. Love that.
Yeah, when I heard this, I was like, it was like that moment when everything
Yeah.
stopped. And I feel like there is a specific moment in time in your career or in everyone else's career where you just have done so many
Yeah.
presentations and you are so, as you mentioned, you also become so good at what you do in general, the topic that you're presenting on, that at some point you may say to yourself, I can skip rehearsals and still that presentation will be way better than the
Mm-hmm.
average one on the
Mm-hmm.
market, right? Do you end up in conversations like that with your customers?
So I can see how that would have been the quote of the conference, because there is
Yeah.
like, especially if you're a professional and you're doing just a huge volume of a specific type of presentation on a specific topic. You can also, in a sense, use the repetitions themselves as a way to keep up your conditioning, right, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's actually, it almost can become too exhausting to be practicing on top of that, right? So you have to creatively come up with ways
Yeah.
to improve and prepare as you're presenting. But in terms of my conversations with clients, we typically focus on this concept of, again, active practice or applicable practice, right? So even in the way we've designed the
Hmm.
sidekick, like, yes, you can use it as a tool offline, not connected to a meeting, to practice, but you can also get those corrections as you're in a live session. And so in that sense, every meeting becomes an opportunity to practice certain skills. And that's kind of an
Yeah.
interesting concept, I think.
Yeah. Hmm. What about, by the way, going back to the software and to Virtual Sapiens, is because you're using
Mm-hmm.
AI and because it is able to scan your behavior in a live manner, in a live fashion during a call, is that like, does it have the learning uh does it have this learning capability in it where it just becomes more and more familiar with what you do? How does that
Right.
there?
So at this point, the machine learning component is really around uh, becoming more familiar with what a human looks like and how humans
Yeah.
act.
Okay.
If there's
Yeah.
no hands, all of a sudden there's an object. What is that? A hand. Like, it's kind of that
Yeah.
kind of learning. At some point in the future, we are interested in personalizing it to the point where you might have an avatar of yourself who knows exactly how you move. We're not there
Okay. Who knows?
yet.
Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. Interesting. So, yeah, I can imagine, because I came from the IT world. I can imagine just how complicated the tool is and the software is by itself. I was not doing AI or anything like that. I was in the database field, but
Hmm.
still, I can imagine that a lot of work. Let's just put it there. Went into creating something
Yeah.
like that. Okay, we are already very close to 30 minutes. 30 minutes in this podcast. I don't know how that happened, but it is real. Talking about, let's go one more for the moments where the stakes are high, the pressure is high. Let's go just very quickly once again there, because I think everyone is curious about that stuff. Um, can we say, because I don't know whether or not you have also heard it, but there are people who read on the web, let's say, that maybe you need to listen to a specific music, maybe you need to wear your favorite
Mhm.
socks, maybe you need to do something a little bit more strange, let's put it this way, and if you do it somehow, that will fix the lack of preparation.
Mhm.
Is that should they believe those advices on the web, or can we say that yeah, these are nice to haves, but without the level zero or ground zero, that preparation, it's kind of tricky, risky move.
Yes, it's absolutely risky. I mean, we in the world of performance, there's a lot of superstition, right? The
Mm,
night before a big show or a big race or a big whatever, I have to have this meal, and this is the only meal I can have. And then the morning of the performance, like this is the specific kind of makeup that I wear or whatever, right? And those things are helpful in that they can, again, give us a sense of control, reduce some of the added anxiety that is above what is really helpful. And so that's great, but none of that will ever replace being prepared and having taken the time to know your material, know the way you're going to deliver it, know your intention for that particular event.
yeah. Where is this thinking coming from though? Like, why do people believe that this can happen? Where is this coming from? Like, in your
I think
opinion,
that
why are people believing that okay, I need to have this meal and
yeah.
work?
So because when I was a gymnast, I was very very superstitious, and I think a lot of it comes from
Okay.
our desire to understand events and we overanalyze the moments leading up to it, right? So we're like, wow,
Hmm.
that was one of the best competitions I've ever had, right? And
Yeah.
it's not like this competition was amazing and I trained every day leading up to it. The competition before that was not as good and I still trained every day leading up to it. So what is the difference? And in your mind you're like, well, the first time I had, XYZ for breakfast and the second time I had ABC for breakfast. So it must be breakfast. That's different. Whereas
Yeah.
in reality, the way that you were preparing, and perhaps it was mostly like a mental preparation that needed to change in the way that you showed up for that competition. It's I think we were always searching for that kind of quick, easy answer of like, oh, okay, thank goodness I figured it out. I just have to have ABC for breakfast and I'll be fine. And it's like, well,
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't turn out to be that one every single time, does it? I
no.
mean, if only it was
Well,
that
yeah, and then
simple.
it's crushing when you have ABC for breakfast and you have a bad competition and you're like, oh my
Yeah, you're like,
God.
why is that
Yeah.
happening? Why is that happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Rachel, we always ask people who are on the podcast who is that other person that they believe we need to invite here. One person, be that a presentation type of person from the industry or a business professional who for some reason, yeah, pops up in your head once you hear the word presentation. Do you have somebody?
Yes. So Kit, Kit, Pang, he is Boston based
Oh,
communication and presentation pro. And I would highly recommend him. He's a
oh,
total mover and shaker in this space.
all right, interesting. I don't know him, but maybe this is going to be the perfect moment for us to kind of know each other and get familiar with what we do. Uh, do you have another like more specific reason why we need to like? How did he created that great impression on you?
Yeah. So,
Something else
yeah,
specific?
well, a few things. So, Kit is the founder of
Okay,
Boston Speaks. And so, for many years, he's
okay,
been running programs for executives and um, uh, different levels of the organization employees to get over the fear of public speaking. That's one of his big
okay,
focuses.
yeah.
And he actually used to be a street dancer.
All
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
interesting.
super cool. So, but I think he has a big summit coming up as well, all focused on bringing different speaking experts into the fold to share their insights. So he also has an amazing network of other communication experts.
That's nice. That is definitely, I'll definitely reach out to him, not just because of the podcast then. One last, which is a two-part question though. What is the best place for people to connect with you, and where can they find more about Visual Sapiens?
Yeah.
Virtual Sapiens.
So probably the best way to connect and follow my work is through LinkedIn. So it's just Rachel Cossar at LinkedIn. And Virtual Sapiens, we actually offer a free trial of our software to any interested user, and you can access that by going to our website, www.virtualsapiens.co.
Brilliant. I will make sure that we link both the website and your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Oh my, I'm hitting my mic already. Rachel, this is 35 minutes already. Very quickly through the podcast. Absolutely. Super nice. And it's super nice to hear the importance of preparation from the athletes and their point of view, and how much it is the same, or less, and how many things you can just take from that world and apply in the business world and say to yourself, wait, this definitely will help me out. That is so nice. We didn't have this point of view up until now. 104, I think, episodes so far.
That's awesome. Great.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for accepting the invite again, and definitely looking forward to just collaborating again, and maybe why not having you again back to the podcast when you have some new exciting things happening also on the platform and with Virtual Sapiens. Yeah, thanks again for stopping by. That was super nice.
Boris, thanks so much.
Absolutely, everyone. Virtualsapiens.com is all of the links together with Rachel's LinkedIn are in the show notes, no matter where you're consuming this, either on Spotify or any other audio platform, or on YouTube where you're consuming the video. It's already in the description below. You can find it. So thanks for listening again. Subscribe to the podcast if you liked it. Like, share, comment. You know how this works. And see you in the next one. Thanks, and bye, everybody.